The enemy isn't out there, it's inside, and its name is ego. Ego is not confidence, it's the illusion that you don't need to grow anymore. It whispers lies dressed as pride. You've made it, you're better than them. But the Stoics feared this more than failure itself, because ego shuts the door to wisdom. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, wrote daily reminders to stay humble, to remember he was mortal, to never believe he was above correction. Humility isn't weakness. It's brutal honesty with yourself. It's choosing to see what's real over what feels good. And in a world obsessed with image, true humility is rebellion. It's the first step toward clarity, discipline, and lasting peace. The Stoics didn't reject success. They rejected the illusion that success defines you. Success, to them, was a byproduct, not a purpose. You can wear a crown and still be a servant to virtue. You can win the world and still lose yourself. True worth, they believed, is measured not by applause, but by alignment with reason, discipline, and duty. Marcus Aurelius ruled the most powerful empire in the world, but each morning he wrote reminders not of his greatness, but of his duty. You are here to serve, not to be served, he told himself. While others clung to their titles, Marcus clung to justice. True greatness, to him, was doing your role fully, honestly, even when no one applauded. Not being above others, but being anchored beneath something greater, reason, discipline, and the common good. Seneca warned us, fear makes cowards, desire makes fools. You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire. We run from discomfort as if we'll die from it, then chase pleasure as if we'll live forever. That's the trap ego sets, to build a name that outlives us, while forgetting to live wisely now. Humility doesn't resist mortality. It makes peace with it. It says, I don't need to be eternal. I need to be present, responsible, just, now. Epictetus was born a slave. He owned nothing, had no title, no freedom, yet he became one of the greatest philosophers in history. He taught that status is an illusion, and that freedom begins in the mind. You may lose power, you may lose fame, you may lose comfort, he said. But no one, not even a tyrant, can take your reason, your discipline, or your character. That's Stoicism, not control over life, but control over yourself in the face of life. To the Stoics, ego was noise, loud, desperate, always performing. Humility, by contrast, was quiet, still, a kind of silence that doesn't retreat, it listens. In that silence, they found clarity. In that stillness, they found strength. Because only in silence can truth echo back without distortion. And only the humble are brave enough to hear it. Ego doesn't just whisper praise. It builds a prison, a golden cage, polished, admired, but cold. Inside it, you're afraid to be seen learning, because learning means you don't know. You're afraid to ask, because asking means you need help. You're afraid to fail, because failure dents the image you've built. And so you stay still, you perform, you protect the mask, while the real you stops growing. But the Stoics knew, better to stumble honestly than to stand frozen by pride. Ego blinds you to feedback, not because you can't handle truth, but because truth threatens the image you've built. Feedback is a mirror, but ego prefers the spotlight, not the reflection. It clings to the illusion of perfection, so it resists anything that says, you still have more to learn. And that resistance is where growth dies. The Stoic, however, welcomes the mirror, because he'd rather be shaped by truth than protected by delusion. Ego fears criticism, not because it's false, but because it threatens the image ego worships. It values appearance over improvement, looking right over being real. That's why ego flinches at correction, even when it's gentle, even when it's true. The Stoics saw criticism as a gift, not an attack, but a mirror, a moment to sharpen the self, rather than protect the mask. The Stoics believed that real power doesn't come from what you already know, it comes from the courage to face what you don't. It's not about having all the answers, it's about admitting you're still a student, even when others expect you to be a master. That kind of honesty takes strength, because it means putting truth above pride, and growth above ego. Growth demands humility, not the kind that whispers quietly in comfort, but the kind that shows up in the face of fear. It's the art of saying, I'm not there yet, but I'm willing to try. It's standing in front of the mountain, knowing you might fall, and climbing anyway. Because humility isn't smallness, it's courage without ego. It's the choice to become, instead of pretend. Ego craves applause, loud, immediate, fleeting. But mastery doesn't chase praise, it chases truth. And truth rarely feels good at first. It challenges, it humbles, it demands you admit, I'm still learning. That's why most stop, because applause is easy. But growth starts where comfort ends. Humility isn't just a mindset, it's a discipline, a daily act of stepping back from pride and stepping into truth. It's waking up each day knowing you still have blind spots and still choosing to see. The Stoics didn't just preach humility, they trained for it, in silence, in simplicity, in sacrifice. Because without practice, humility becomes performance. But with practice, it becomes power. The Stoics trained daily in the art of stepping back, not to escape life, but to confront it with clarity. They didn't write just to remember the day, they wrote to examine the self, to expose ego in its hiding places, subtle pride, hidden resentment, the need to impress. Journaling wasn't just reflection, it was realignment, a return to truth when emotion blurred the path. Every word on the page was a quiet rebellion against self-deception. For the Stoics, journaling wasn't just reflection, it was self-confrontation, a quiet battle fought with ink instead of pride. Marcus Aurelius didn't write to inspire others, he wrote to hold a mirror to himself, to question his motives, to strip away illusion. Every line in his meditations whispered, remember who you're trying to be. Because greatness isn't built in front of crowds, it's carved in solitude. The Stoics embraced voluntary discomfort, not to suffer, but to train the soul. They knew comfort dulls the edge of discipline, so they chose the cold bath, the plain meal, the quiet walk alone, not because they enjoyed pain, but because they refused to be ruled by luxury. Every denial was a reminder, I am stronger than my cravings. They weren't escaping pleasure, they were building the strength to walk away from it. The Stoics reminded themselves daily, what you fear to lose holds power over you, not because it's valuable, but because it controls your choices. If your peace depends on keeping it, then it owns you. That's why they practiced letting go, not in words, but in action, so that when loss comes, as it always does, it doesn't break them. Because true freedom begins where fear ends. And they practiced restraint in speech, not to appear wise, but to become it. The Stoics believed, the more you speak, the less you hear. So they chose silence, not as absence, but as attention. Because in silence, ego fades. And when ego fades, clarity rises. They spoke only when their words could stand beside their actions and still matter. You don't stumble into humility. You carve it slowly, quietly, in moments no one notices. Pausing before you speak, admitting when you're wrong, choosing patience over pride. The Stoics knew the real battle was inside. That's why they wrote, not to impress, but to confront. Each line on the page was a mirror, a blade, a guide. Humility isn't built in front of an audience. It's forged in silence when no one's watching, but you still choose the harder path. The Stoics practiced restraint in speech, not to impress, but to understand, because the wise speak less, to hear more, not just others, but themselves. In silence, the noise of ego fades. And when the ego fades, clarity rises. True wisdom doesn't rush to speak. It waits, listens, then answers only when necessary. Stories teach what theory can't. You can memorize quotes, but you remember what broke you. You carry the lesson from pain that had your name on it. That's why the Stoics valued real experience over borrowed wisdom. Because it's not until the storm hits you that the philosophy becomes yours. A CEO once praised by millions lost everything. He thought leadership meant being unquestioned, above feedback, above doubt. But pride made him deaf, and ego turned blind spots into collapse. He didn't fall from failure. He fell from refusing to see it coming. Because when no one can challenge you, reality eventually will. Meanwhile, a quiet craftsman with no spotlight, no stage, becomes a mentor to hundreds. Not through speeches, but through presence. He shows up, he listens, he works with care. And slowly, others begin to follow. Not because he demanded respect, but because he embodied it. That's what the Stoics knew. True influence doesn't shine, it shapes. In ancient texts, we read of warriors who conquered cities, but were conquered by their own pride. They won every battle except the one within, and their fall wasn't from weakness, but from believing they couldn't fall. But then there are the others, the ones who lost it all, who were exiled, silenced, forgotten. And in that silence, they found themselves, they returned, not louder, but wiser, not with gold in hand, but with peace in their soul, humbled, sharpened, finally free, because failure can do two things. It can break your pride or shape your character. The Stoics chose the latter. They didn't fear falling, they feared not learning. To them, failure wasn't the end, it was the fire, a test not of skill, but of ego. Would you hide in shame or rise with truth? Every setback became a mirror, and in that reflection they asked, who are you without your success? The Stoic path isn't glamorous. There are no spotlights, no standing ovations, but it's forged in truth, tested by pain, and strengthened by daily discipline. While others chase fame, the Stoic carves character, because fame fades quickly, loudly, but character echoes, not in what you say, but in how you stand, when everything else falls. Even the strongest minds need anchors. No one is immune to pride. No one floats above ego forever. That's why the Stoics didn't just think, they trained. They used tools, rituals, daily reminders, not to impress others, but to protect their clarity, to keep their pride in check, and their perspective sharp. Because the mind, like a sword, dulls without discipline, and truth must be sharpened every single day. Memento mori, remember your mortality, not to fear death, but to honor life, to remind yourself, no matter how high you rise, no matter the titles, the praise, the crowns, the end is the same for all. You are not guaranteed tomorrow, so speak truth today, live with intention today. Let every breath remind you, this moment is borrowed. Make it count. Premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of hardship. Don't just hope for peace, train for storms. The Stoics didn't pray for life to be easy. They asked to be ready when it wasn't. They rehearsed every loss in their minds, not to suffer early, but to strengthen their response. When pain arrived, they'd already met it, not with fear but with calm, because they knew the expected blow hurts less. The view from above, the Stoic lens of perspective. Rise above your life, not to escape it, but to understand it. Imagine your city from the sky. Now your house, your problems, your ego, they shrink. What felt massive becomes tiny. What felt eternal becomes fleeting. From up there, pride dissolves, envy fades, and all that remains is this. You are a small part of something vast, and that is beautiful. So live with grace, and let go of what was never yours to control. These weren't just rituals, they were lifelines, not for appearance, but for survival. In a world full of noise, pride, and distraction, the Stoic returned to these tools like a warrior returns to training, not to feel powerful, but to stay grounded, because without discipline, ego takes the throne. These practices reminded them daily, live with purpose, not pride, with clarity, not control, with presence, not performance. Ego hasn't disappeared, it's just gotten better at hiding. Today, it lives in likes, followers, job titles, and status updates. It feeds off attention and fears irrelevance. It tells you you're not enough, unless the world says so. And so you perform, you filter, you chase, but the Stoic knows better. You are not your numbers. You are not your reputation. You are what you practice in silence. Your value doesn't rise with praise or fall with insult. It stays anchored because it comes from who you are when no one's watching. Ego makes noise. Wisdom stays quiet. And in that silence, you find peace. Ego is the enemy, not because it shouts too loud, but because it whispers what you want to hear. It builds walls between you and the truth, covering flaws with praise and masking weakness with pride. But truth doesn't shout. It waits on the other side of those walls. And to reach it, you must let your ego crack. Let the illusion fall. Only then can you see yourself clearly and begin to grow. Choose humility daily, not because it's easy, but because it's the foundation of everything that lasts. Discipline begins when you admit you're not above the work. Growth begins when you accept you still have more to learn. Pride seeks shortcuts, but humility kneels at the starting line, ready to earn every step. It's not weakness, it's strength pointed inward, the quiet kind that builds you, day by day. Like, comment, and reflect. What's one small way you'll quiet your ego today? A pause before speaking, admitting a mistake, choosing growth over pride. Drop it below, and let's grow in silence, together.